Well, good morning, church. It's Father's Day, and that means we're going to step away from our series on worship, and we're going to talk about men today. Okay? The world loves to bash men right now, and you need to know that God loves men, and He's not embarrassed that you're a man if you're a man. And so, just for fun, this is actually in keeping with this. And how many of you have ever seen the Red Green Show? Okay, if you haven't seen the Red Green Show, you need to watch the Red Green Show someday. Or just Google the men's prayer and listen to that part. It's just hysterical because the men of Possum Lodge, somewhere in the Netherlands of Canada, they meet for their weekly meeting, and this is what it looks like. They're about to stand up and sit down, stand up and sit down. And they start with the men's prayer. And if I could have figured out how to get this, you could have heard it from them. But we recite in unison. So guys, if you know it, you can say it with me. I'm a man, but I can change if I have to, I guess. That's the man's prayer. So if we're talking about men today, why in the world would we read Proverbs 31 about the virtuous woman? I'm glad you asked. See, when I was a young man, just starting out in my walk with Jesus as an adult, there was a phrase that was going around the Christian community of college-age students that I was a part of. It was something that I had never heard growing up in the church that I attended as a boy. But it was something I began hearing a lot, and that phrase was a Proverbs 31 woman. See, because we wanted our lives to be built on the teaching of the Bible, we wanted to be looking for ways we wanted to be more like what we read about in Scripture. We wanted to be like Jesus, and we wanted to look like the heroes of the faith that we read about. We wanted to be what the Lord wanted us to be, and we wanted to live up to those models that He'd given us in the Bible. By the way, that's still a good idea, okay? But if you were a young lady back then, you were strongly encouraged to be a Proverbs 31 woman. And Proverbs 31 described this ideal woman, and there was a lot of pressure that was placed on women, and sometimes it was subtle and sometimes not so subtle, that you had to live up to this biblical ideal. Well, if you were a young woman back then, if you were a young man back then, you were strongly encouraged to look for a Proverbs 31 woman. She's the one you should marry. And sometimes the picture that was used to portray what that woman looked like was a bit skewed. As if the measuring stick we were supposed to be using for a wedding, for your bride, that this ideal woman was something like out of the ads for brides from the Western frontier days, Wanted, strong woman able to handle a plow, plant and harvest the family crops, grow a garden, manage the livestock, must make her own clothes from the hides of the animals she kills, prefer if she has all her teeth. But honestly, the point was that what we were hearing was that if you were a young man, you should be looking for a godly woman, not just chasing after the girls who were popular or looking for some supermodel and thinking that was going to be the girl you needed. And it was really good advice. Because the truth is that Proverbs 31 is indeed intended and was intended in its day to provide for men in the biblical world a picture of what the ideal woman would look like, and to hold that ideal up for women as well, so they'd be encouraged to pursue marriage with the right goal in mind. You see, God has ideas, and some of those ideas are what we ought to look like and what we ought to live like and what marriage ought to be like. So He provides models for us to learn from. Proverbs 31 is one of those models we're supposed to learn from. So we value the attributes and the qualities that make for healthy people and healthy marriages. Can I have my Bible, hon? Nope, it's all right. Bible, it's all right. I'm going to borrow this a little bit here, Greg. All right. So I recognized long ago that we were missing something, though, when we were promoting this Proverbs 31 woman ideal. And we were putting all of this pressure on women to conform to a particular image. And to be honest, the image wasn't always drawn very accurately from what the text actually says. But I was reading Proverbs 31 in this Bible right here, and I started noticing that there's a lot that this passage says about the husband, about the man. See, this passage isn't just about the ideal woman. It has clues for us about the ideal man, about the godly man, the ideal husband. And that's when I began to realize that if you want a Proverbs 31 woman for a wife, guys, you need to learn how to be a Proverbs 31 man, a godly man. And today I want to show you what God says here about that image, about that guy. I want to inspire you. I want hopefully to correct you if you need correction. I want to motivate you so you can grow into the good man that God has in mind for you and what He's working on developing in you. And by the way, this is going to help you whether you're married or single, whether you're hoping to be married or you don't think that's ever going to happen, whether you're young or whether you're old, if you've been married 3 weeks or 60 years, this is still going to help you. Okay? It's because being a Proverbs 31 man will not only make you a better husband, it'll make you a better friend. It'll make you a better man. And it's never too late. So let's go for it. Are you with me, guys? One guy's with me. Okay. I'm talking to you, brother. All right, so the first thing we see in verse 10 is in verse 10. And in my Bible, right here in that Bible, I wrote beside verse 10 these words, because verse 10 says, an excellent wife who can find? Her worth is far above jewels. I wrote, I have found an excellent wife. See, the godly man recognizes the value of his wife. And guys, I'm going to reference wives a lot today because that's what the passage is discussing. But I want you to understand something. We need to extend this to refer to women in general. It's just especially important that we learn what God wants us to be toward that one special woman. And learning how to treat all women will help us know how to rightly treat that special woman and vice versa. It goes both ways. Proverbs 18:22 says, he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Our society today is rushing headlong like lemmings over a cliff in our foolish attempt to run away from God and what God designed for us. God thought up marriage. He invented it. God thought up relationships, friendships, romantic relationships. God's the one who designed all that. He made you for that. And you can't improve on what God made. And we have a jillion books and magazines and blogs and advice columnists and movies and TV shows and radio talk shows and all these things about relationships and all this supposed advice about marriage and how to do relationships. And with all of that, the world is still completely clueless about marriage. And according to the statistics, at least, we're not doing that much better in the church. So how about if we try listening to what the author of marriage and the author of relationships said to the one who thought up marriage and relationships? Let's listen to him. Let's listen to the one who created us male and female. By the way, He created us male and female, not male and female and other and to be determined and none of the above. Okay? So, guys, how do you esteem your wife? What are the things about her that you really prize? There's going to be lots of things, of course, that are special about her, things that you might especially appreciate. But do you also recognize that she's a gift to you? Do you appreciate the favor that God has shown you in giving you this woman? Mary and I had been married just a few years when I started realizing something. I realized that God had seen my needs way before I even knew what they were. And I'll be honest, when we started dating, I really liked her. I was super excited that she liked me too. And there were things about her that I thought were special and wonderful. I really appreciated her kindness. She's the kindest person I've ever known. And everyone who knows her will say that. And I loved her commitment to the Lord, and I asked her to marry me because I wanted her to marry me, and because the Lord said to do it. But I didn't really know what a gift she was to me. I didn't realize how God had given me someone who fit what I needed, because I didn't even know what I needed yet. And then about 20 years later, I started to realize it even more deeply. Do you recognize the gift that you have in your wife? Let me put it in terms you might be able to understand, guys. Have you figured out that you married way above your head? Okay? That's right. You know what I mean. That's grace, brother. That's undeserved favor of God to give you that lady. Okay? So if you're ever tempted to start looking around, just remind yourself of this. She loves you, which is pretty astounding to begin with. Let's just be honest, okay? She's willing to put up with all of your flaws, so maybe it would be wise to reciprocate that, right? Do you recognize the value she has? The godly man recognizes the value of his wife. He esteems her above jewels, above wealth. She's more valuable to him than the things that can be acquired. And whether that's money or cars or guns or boats or houses, titles, electronics, whatever it is that you wish you had more of, she's worth more than that altogether. And the godly man considers her more valuable than stuff. Now, it's very easy to say, I value my wife more than stuff. But does my life back up what my mouth says? Does my checkbook back up what my mouth says? Does how I use my spare time back up what my mouth says? See, whatever I spend time on, whatever I give myself to, that's what I value. And I know this really well. I've been often wrong here, and I need reminding that it's very easy to take your wife for granted, to assume she's just fine with the leftovers of my time and attention that I give her. I'm focused on work, on football, or hobbies, or whatever it is that captivates you and has your attention. But the godly man values his wife, gives her his time. She has his full attention. He understands something. He understands she's a gift from God. She's God's gift to you to help you. God's gift to you to make you better. She's God's gift to you to be the friend who knows you better than anyone else and keeps coming back. She's the gift of God who sees you in your underwear and still smiles when you come home. She adds value to everything you do and everything you are. Well, the second thing we see about the Proverbs 31 man is in verse 11. The godly man trusts his wife. He trusts her. He places his full confidence in her. He puts the weight of his life on her. By the way, that's why you need to seek out a godly woman if you're not married, guys. Not just the pretty girl who catches your eye, because a godly woman's the only one who's going to be able to bear that kind of weight. The weight of your life, the weight of all that you are. You need a woman who's entrusted her own life to Jesus, who's walking in the yoke with Him so that He can help her carry the weight that is your baggage. The godly man trusts his wife, and he entrusts himself to his wife. And that's a bit scary for guys. We have trouble trusting. Guys, I understand this. You live in a world where you are routinely stabbed in the back. Your livelihood depends on being able to compete in a crowded and merciless marketplace that shows you no favors and rewards those who are aggressive and are going to take advantage. Every bit of indecision, every mistake, every fumble, every sign of weakness, they're going to take advantage of that. And so you spend your days in that kind of a world, and what happens is it becomes extremely hard to trust. You get calloused from the daily battles. Your heart turns inward and you're guarded, because vulnerability is a liability. So you don't show weakness. You never drop your guard. You never back down from a fight. And you're very careful whom you trust. Because it's easier. It's safer to be alone. It's safer to not let anybody into those private places, to always hold back, to stay stoic, invulnerable, closed off. And whether you cover that inner fear and that inner pain with jokes and laughter or clowning or with silence and withdrawal, the end is the same. I don't let anybody in. Like that famous Simon and Garfunkel song, I am a rock, I am an island. And if you've been hurt by a woman in the past, guys, everything doubles. I get that, I understand that. But the godly man trusts his wife. He takes the initiative and invests his trust in her. It is an investment. It is a risk. But it's a decision to take your most valuable assets and place them in her keeping. Your heart, your fears, your dreams, your hopes, your plans, your half-baked schemes and goofy ideas. You entrust them to her. You entrust your heart to her above everyone else. There ought to be things that you tell your wife that you don't tell anybody else. And probably a lot more things than you think you should. Because the godly man invests his trust in his wife. He's looking for the gain that's going to come from that investment, the gain from being a part of a loving relationship. See, she's not his maid. She's not his cook. She's not just someone to take care of the things that he doesn't particularly want to take care of. The godly man's wife is the person who's going to stabilize his ambitions, keep him from running off the rails. He's the one who's going to fuel his passion and help keep him on track, to help him succeed. He invests in her because there's great benefit to being married, to being in this loving relationship. When you invest your trust in your wife, you are planting seeds that will reap a harvest of good. She will bring you great good, Scripture says. She will bring you repayment of that trust in ways you couldn't even see when you started making the deposit. Did you know that married men in general live longer than single men? God did. God thought it up. He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. Here's another thing you may not have known. I don't know, studies have shown that women who carry a little extra weight live longer than the men who point it out to them. Just look at her and smile. Investing trust in your wife builds intimacy. Okay? And intimacy is one of the most important building blocks in a healthy marriage. She is wired by God to respond to your trust in her. See, when you divulge your heart to your wife, you're giving her the gift she wants above almost every other thing. You're letting her into the place she wants to be, the place she belongs, where she's the only person allowed in. The godly man trusts his wife and trusts himself to her. The third thing we see in Proverbs 31 about the Proverbs 31 man is found in verse 23. Because the godly man, he says he's known when he sits in the gates among the elders. The godly man is involved in his church and in fellowship with the leaders of the church. He is a known quantity in the congregation. He's not a stranger to the rest of the church family. See, in the biblical world, this reference to the gates of the city where the man sits with the elders, this is a picture of life in the ancient world in the cities. Okay? The gates were the entrances to the city. If a city was large, there would be walls all around it, its outside perimeter, to keep the enemy out. And the gates would be barred at night and open during the day. And even smaller villages would often have some kind of a barrier to keep bandits out, so they couldn't just wander through. But right inside the gates would be the place where the men of the city would gather. And this is where business was conducted. This is where transactions are negotiated. We see this, for instance, in the book of Ruth. Boaz goes to the city gates to make the arrangements to marry Ruth and to redeem her land. It's the place where the men would meet to discuss matters that concerned the community and to make community decisions. It was the place where civil judgments were made. The local elders would meet and they would listen to those who wanted to settle disputes. They would reach a verdict that would be recognized by all the people in the village, and those who were there would be witnesses to the process. It was the place where the community was represented in this meeting of the men, which in that time and culture represented the leadership and the citizenry of the city or the village. So when Proverbs says this godly man is known when he sits among the elders in the gates of the city, it's telling us that he is known by the leaders of his community. Because to sit with someone in the biblical world implies fellowship and relationship and friendship. You don't sit with an enemy. You don't have a meal with an enemy. You only sit with someone who is your equal, your friend, someone you are related to. The godly man is friends with the leaders of his community. He's in relationship with them. He belongs with them. Excuse me. Now for us, that community represents the church family. But I want to hasten to say it isn't limited to that. The godly man isn't confined to the church house. Okay? He's involved in his community and he's a known commodity there. Because the godly man's taking the light of Jesus to the dark places where he lives and works and goes. He's recognized by others who live with him in that place because he's known. There's something that happens inside the heart of a man when he's known, when he's recognized. I know we can get really twisted when we start living for that recognition and living for the applause of those who are around you and craving to be popular. All you have to do is think about the caricatures of politicians and actors and you get the mental image of, well, that's not what we're trying to be. But that's just a twisted picture of manhood. That's a distortion of something that God put in us. Because God put in the hearts of men the desire to be known and to be a part of what's important. It's become a cliche to say that everyone's a leader. I don't care for cliches much, and I do understand, though, that when we say everyone's a leader, we're trying to inspire people and trying to inspire everyone to see you have a capacity for some level of leadership that God can develop in you. I don't think every man is a leader, but I think that most of us can lead in some way, in some shape, some form, at some point. But more importantly, I believe that every man belongs at the table with leaders. I believe every man belongs at the table in the conversation with leaders. I think we need to be in fellowship with leaders, guys. I think there's something inside of us that responds when we're a part of the circle. And there's something inside of us that dies or goes very, very badly when we're left outside on our own. God always intended for men to belong, to be in community together, to work together, to discuss important matters together, to be involved together in the church. Church was never intended to be a meeting that we attended occasionally and then left to live our lives separately. Never touched anyone. It doesn't mean we have to live in a commune. Okay? It doesn't mean we can't have privacy. Some of us are more gregarious by nature. Some of us are more private. That's normal. That's just that God made us different. That's okay. But we were intended to be together. Godly men don't live in isolation. Godly men aren't lone rangers off by themselves. They're involved with the rest of the community, including the women. We don't need to go back to the bad old days of the guys are smoking in the parlor and the women are in the kitchen doing dishes. Okay? That was just a different form of isolation. Godly men are involved with the church because they want to be known. They understand the value of being connected with other godly men and other godly women. And they especially understand the need to be connected to the church leadership. If we are all servants of Jesus Christ, and we're trying to be faithful servants, then it ought to matter to all of us what He's saying to the church. So we're listening, and it ought to matter to us so that it moves us to want to know, how can I participate in what Jesus is doing in His church? And that's true for both men and women. I'm focusing on the guys today because quite honestly, for quite a while, at least in the Western church, but I think it's global, the picture of the church is that the women come and the women serve and the women pray and the women keep the church afloat while the men give their attention to making money and arguing about politics or playing golf and watching football and tinkering on their cars. Hello. The godly man is known by the leadership of the church because he's in relationship with them. He's familiar with what's going on in church because he's involved. He's not a spectator. He's not carping on the sidelines when things don't go the way he thinks they ought to. He's involved because he's actively following Jesus. He cares about God's people and he's living for eternity instead of for his own pleasure. And a godly wife cares about that. The most common complaint of Christian women is that their husband doesn't take a serious interest in the family's spiritual life. He doesn't go to church. He doesn't read the Bible. He doesn't help with the children's spiritual training. And he really isn't engaged with Jesus or with the church. That's just sort of a side thing. And that common complaint has some juice to it. Because sociologists have studied the patterns in the American church and they've demonstrated something. they've demonstrated that the single most important factor in whether children who are raised in church stay in the church, stay engaged when they grow up, or abandon their faith and leave the church, the single most important factor is this: did Dad live out his faith at home? Now, some smart guy or some smart aleck is going to pipe up right about now and say, "Pastor, you're talking to the guys who aren't here. We're here." That's a fair point. It's actually a very good point. I'm not here to accuse anyone. But I do want to encourage you. I maybe want to motivate you a little bit to start asking God, how can I be more connected to the church? How can I be more connected to the leadership of the church? Let God tell you what you ought to do. Let Him tell you if you need to change. Let Him lead you to find the right balance of your life between work and family and church and whatever else you've got going on. I just ask you to remember this: the godly man is involved in his church and he's in fellowship with the leaders of his church. So ask God, what should I do? Verse 28 and 29 is where we'll find the fourth thing about this Proverbs 31 man. It says, the godly man praises his wife both publicly and privately. How do you speak about your wife to others when she's not around? How do you speak to her face? And if you're not married, ask yourself these same questions about the women in your life, your sister or your mother or your co-workers, your boss, your neighbors. I can tell you how a lot of men talk about their wives. It's horrible. Men, you need to understand something really, really important. Your words have tremendous power to inflict harm to your wife or to build her up. You can kill her spirit, or you can give her the sense that she can do anything. Ridicule, put-downs, subtle little digs at her, insults, pointing out her flaws, her failures, especially if you can do it in a way that gets a laugh from everybody around you. Those cutting remarks, demeaning comments, all of those things cut her to the heart, even if she laughs. Slowly kills her. Drains her confidence, drains her joy, drains her hope and her love, destroys her sense of self-worth and value and her sense of security, which makes it impossible for her to respond to you with affection and care, or to want to support the things that you want to see happen in your life together. So when the other guys at the shop or the office or the golf course are trying to coax you into joining them into the game of grousing about your spouses and one-upping each other, who can tell the thing that makes fun of their wife and get the biggest laugh, the godly man doesn't take the bait. The godly man praises his wife, and he sidesteps that whole temptation to win the game of who's the most macho man by putting down his bride. Instead, he finds a way to sing her praises both behind her back and to her face. Luke 6:45 says, your mouth speaks out of that which fills your heart. So if poisonous talk is coming out of your mouth, it's revealing something about your heart, guys. So if you're excusing the way you talk about her and the way you talk to her and saying, oh, it's all just a joke, it's all just a little fun, you're deceiving yourself. And the proof is in how she reacts when you talk. How she responds to you after you talk like that. She's wincing emotionally. She's flinching when you talk. Maybe even if she covers it up with a chuckle. You're hitting the target. You're hitting the bullseye all right. You're stabbing her right in the heart and showing your true colors at the same time. Let's not do that, guys. Let's be better than that. Here's a little free tidbit that'll go a long way for you. If you want your wife to know that you see her as a gift and you value her above all the stuff around you, beware of comparing her with other women when she comes out looking lesser than them. Trust me, she's already fighting those feelings of being too fat or too skinny or too small here, too big there, not smart enough, not pretty enough, not fill in the blank enough. She's already battling that. So ask God to keep reminding you of how good you've got it with this gift He gave you, and then keep reminding yourself of what He said, and then keep reminding her of what He said to you about her. He happens to like her a lot. See, when a godly man praises his wife regularly, especially at home, it builds her confidence and gives her the support she needs to do what she wants to do, which is to make you successful, to make you happy, to help you any way she can. And it teaches the children how to respect people, how to honor people, how to speak about people, how to use their words to build up instead of tearing down, how to show grace to people instead of pointing out all of their failings. And so they copy Dad's example and they praise their mom. Verse 28 shows us that. The last thing this passage says about the Proverbs 31 man is found in verse 31. It says, give her the product, the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her. Again, I laughed when I saw this picture. I love this picture. Because the Proverbs 31 woman is an industrious, multi-talented, multitasking marvel of organization and leadership and abilities and skills. She's productive, she's spiritual, she's caring, she's thoughtful, she's wise, she's kind. She has tons of ability, and she's using that to great advantage. She excels at a lot of things, and God says to her husband, let her. Let her enjoy the benefit of all the things that she's doing. Feed her, nurture her giftedness. Make it possible for her to max out her fruitfulness. Whatever she's good at doing, make it possible for her to do that well. And let her enjoy the honor from being praised by you, from being praised by others, being sought out by others. Let her enjoy the benefit, the profitability of her labor. Let her benefit from the blessing that comes from her fruitfulness and her productivity. Let her enjoy the praise and honor for who she is and what she does. The godly man encourages and nurtures his wife so that she flourishes in the things she excels at. Because the godly man knows a key secret to being a husband. The godly man is not just a husband of a wife. The godly man husbands a wife. What are you talking about? Most of us think of the word husband as a noun. It's a title, it's a description. If I'm a married man, it's what I am. It comes from a marvelous word, English word comes from the Old Norse term husbandi, house dweller, the master of the house. You have to say it with a nice little Scandinavian love, husbandi. But the word is also a verb, and that's what you need to remember. Not the status of the guy married to this woman. The husband, to husband, is to cultivate something for fruitfulness. It is to manage something well so that it is conserved and taken care of and productive. To husband is to ensure fruitfulness. That's how we get the word husbandry, care of animals or care of gardens or things like that. Husbanding is caring for the things you've been given so that they flourish, to protect them so they're not damaged by disease or destroyed by predators. Husbanding is helping the things that are in your care so that they develop fully, so that their potential fruitfulness is realized and the goodness that is in them comes to full maturity. Husbanding is tending to the needs of everything in your care so that it blossoms and flourishes and grows, so that the natural beauty and glory can be seen and appreciated. Husbanding is ensuring that the environment for those in your care is healthy so that they can thrive. You say to me, I'm her husband. I say, fine, that's great. Are you husbanding? Are you cultivating her carefully? Are you tending to her so that she's free from anxiety and free from care? Are you building a safe and healthy environment around her so that she's able to grow well and beautifully? Are you doing all that you can to allow her gifts and talents and abilities to flourish? Are you making it easy for her beauty and her abilities to be seen? Are you helping her to develop, helping her to mature emotionally, relationally, socially, personally, intellectually, spiritually, even professionally, if that's part of what's going on there? Are you husbanding your wife? Well, how can we tell? Let's look at her. Is she radiant? Is she thriving? Or is she shriveling up emotionally, relationally? If she was a garden, and you looked at her, would her countenance and her mindset and her spiritual vitality and her relationships, would they show that you've been taking care of her? Or would that show signs of neglect and abuse and ignoring her? Today's Father's Day. Okay? If you're a dad, it's a great day to rejoice for the gift of your kids. It's a great day to remember and honor and treat the mother of your children well. She's the reason you get to have the family over to grill. She's the reason you get to go to Dairy Queen or whatever it is you do to celebrate this day. So if you're married, remember this. Above all else, your wife wants two things from you. If you want to be married, remember these two things. She wants two things. She wants you to love God and lead the family spiritually by following Jesus Christ yourself and setting the example for the family of what a godly man looks like. And secondly, she wants you to love her more than any other woman and to live like that's really the truth, not just a thing you say, but you also have to say it, and often. Now, if you happen to have kids, she wants one more thing. She wants you to love your kids. She wants you to fight for them, not with them. She wants you to help her with them, to be involved with them, so she doesn't feel like she's all alone, that you've chosen work over them. That's it. That's what she wants. Well, she'd also like it if you'd pick up after yourself and bathe regularly and help with the household chores, right? But mostly, she's looking for that Proverbs 31 man. And as a church, can we do that? Can we help one another, guys? So that the ladies among us say, I go to a church with a bunch of Proverbs 31 men. Let's pray. Lord, help us. We're guys, but we can change if we have to, I guess. And so we're asking you who thought up this whole thing of male and female and thought it was a really good thing, help us to walk into that, to grow up into the guys we need to be. Help us to honor and serve our wife, if we're married, the ladies if we're not, to be men who look like Proverbs 31 men ought to look. Thank you, Jesus.